Wade Calloway's fingers found the knot before his eyes did. The burlap sack sat baking at the roadside like something a man had thrown away without looking back. He should have driven past. Every reasonable part of him said drive past. Then June's hand closed around his wrist. "Papa?" Her voice small and absolutely certain. It moved. He stopped the wagon. He pressed 2 fingers against the rough cloth, and something pressed back. Not wind, not animal, a heartbeat, faint as a candle in a rainstorm, but real. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow along all the way to the very end. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wagon road into Harrow Creek ran straight as a man's worst intentions and twice as unforgiving. Wade Calloway drove it the way he drove everything these days, without hurry, without much purpose, with the particular kind of patience that wasn't really patience at all, but exhaustion wearing patience's coat. June sat beside him on the bench, 8 years old, bare feet dangling over the edge. She'd been drawing in the air with one finger the way she did when she was thinking through something she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. She hadn't said much of anything for 6 months. Not since her mother Anna had gone into the ground outside of Harrow Creek on a Tuesday in February with frost on the grass, and no good reason any of it should have happened the way it did. Wade didn't push her to talk. He'd learned that much. You couldn't reach into a person who'd gone quiet and drag the words out of them. You just had to stay close enough that when they were ready, you were still there. He was thinking about fence posts when June grabbed his wrist. Not gently. She grabbed it the way children grabbed things when the world had suddenly presented them with something they didn't have words for yet. "Papa!" He pulled the reins. The horses slowed. "What is it?" She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the south side of the road, at the scrub brush and the dry grass, and the shadow of an old fence post that marked the edge of Alderman's land, at something half hidden in that shadow. Something large enough to notice if you were looking, small enough to miss if you weren't. A burlap sack, tied at the top with rough rope, sitting very still in the August heat. June said, "It moved." "June, it moved, Papa. I saw it." He set the brake. He was off the wagon before he'd made a conscious decision to be off it. 4 strides across the dry ground, and he was crouching in front of the sack with his knife already in his hand, because Wade Calloway had spent 11 years as a Pinkerton detective, and he had learned early that when something felt wrong, it was wrong, and you didn't stand around debating the matter. He pressed 2 fingers against the burlap. He stayed completely still, and something pressed back. He cut the rope at the top. The burlap fell open, and Wade Calloway, who had ridden into gunfights without his hands shaking, who had faced men across railroad cars in the dark and not blinked, had to take 1 full second before he could process what he was looking at. A woman. Young. 20-something maybe. Dark auburn hair matted against her face. Wrists bound with rope that had been there long enough to cut through the skin in 2 places. She was breathing in shallow, uneven pulls, her chest barely moving like her body had been negotiating with the August heat for hours over the question of whether to keep going. Her eyes opened. They were green. The particular green of creek water in early spring. And they looked at Wade the way eyes looked at things when they'd stopped believing there was anything left worth seeing. Then she screamed. It wasn't a loud scream. There wasn't enough air left in her for loud. It was thin and cracked, and it went straight through Wade's sternum like a blade, and she thrashed backward into the burlap, with her bound wrists coming up between them. And every line of her body said she was bracing for a blow she had already decided was inevitable. Wade sat back on his heels immediately. He put the knife on the ground. He raised both hands, open palms out. Easy. He kept his voice the way he kept his breathing, slow and even. Easy now. Nobody here is going to hurt you. You have my word on that. She didn't believe him. He could see it. He'd spent 11 years learning to read people in the space between what they said and what their bodies did, and every inch of her body said she had been told things like that before and knew exactly what they were worth. Then June stepped around him. She crouched down in the dirt without hesitation. She looked at the woman the way June looked at most things, quiet, direct, without any of the careful calculation adults put between themselves and the things that frighten them. "You're hurt," June said. It wasn't a question. "Your hands are bleeding. Does it hurt real bad?" The woman stared at her. "I'm June," the girl said, like that explained everything. "That's my papa. His name's Wade." A pause. "He won't hurt you. He don't hurt things." She thought about it for a moment. "He cried for 2 whole nights when our dog Chester got kicked by a horse and died. I'm not supposed to tell people that." Something shifted behind the woman's eyes. The animal terror backed off 1 inch, maybe 2. She looked from June to Wade and back again. Her chest was still heaving with shallow breaths, but her hands had stopped pushing against the air between them. "My name's Nora," she said. Barely sound, 1 syllable at a time. "Nora Bell." "Nora." Wade nodded once slow. "I'm going to pick you up and put you in my wagon. We need to get you out of this sun. You can fight me if you feel like it. I won't stop you. But I need you to let me try." She looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she gave the smallest nod he had ever seen in his life. She was lighter than she should have been. Lighter than June, nearly. That hit him somewhere low and hard in the chest, and didn't let go. He drove straight back to the ranch. Harrow Creek could wait, supplies could wait, everything could wait. Nora sat in the wagon bed. June sat beside her close, but not touching the way June sat near injured things present without pressure. Wade couldn't hear what his daughter was saying. She was talking the way she'd started talking again lately, quiet and continuous, like a creek finding its way around rocks. Whatever she was saying it only to Nora. He glanced back twice. Both times Nora was watching June with an expression he couldn't quite name, like a woman who had forgotten what ordinary conversation felt like and was very slowly trying to remember if she'd ever been allowed to have it. When they pulled through the gate, Nora looked at the front porch and went completely still. "That's just our porch," June said. "The step on the right side is loose. Papa keeps saying he's gonna fix it." "I'll fix it," Wade said. "You've been saying that since March," June said. He didn't answer that. He helped Nora down from the wagon. She stood on unsteady legs, and her eyes moved immediately across the yard, the barn, the fence line, the road they'd come in on. She was mapping exits. He'd seen men do that in railroad depots and courtroom hallways. He'd never seen a woman do it standing in a stranger's yard in broad daylight while bleeding from both wrists. "Ain't nobody followed us," he said quietly. Her eyes snapped to his. "Watch the road the whole way back," he said. "We're alone." She didn't relax entirely, but she let him lead her up the porch steps and through the front door. He pulled out a kitchen chair. She sat in it and kept her bound wrists in her lap, and wouldn't look at either of them like the ropes were something she was ashamed of, rather than something that had been done to her. He got his knife again. He showed it to her first. Then he cut the rope. The rope fell away, and she made one small tight sound, a single sharp breath, because the blood was rushing back into her hands, and it hurt. Then she pressed her lips together and made no other sound. And that silence that practiced deliberate silence told Wade more about what she had endured than anything she was going to tell him out loud for a long time. "June," he said. "Get the medicine tin." "Already got it," June said, setting it on the table. He sat across from Nora, not beside her. Across. The full width of the table between them. "I ain't going to ask you to explain yourself," he said. "Not right now. We're going to clean up those wrists. That's all." Nora stared at the table. Then she looked up. Her eyes were raw in a way that had nothing to do with crying. Ground down to something underneath. Something exposed and bone-tired. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why are you helping me?" It didn't come out like a question. It came out like something she'd asked herself 100 times and stopped expecting an answer to. Wade thought about it the way he thought about most things. He didn't rush it. "My daughter told me to stop the wagon," he said finally. "She's got better judgment than me, so I stopped." June set a plate of cornbread on the table with a decisive thud. "That's the nicest thing Papa has ever said about me." "Don't get used to it," he said. Nora looked at June, and for just half a second, 1/2 of 1 second, something moved across her face that might have been the ghost of a smile. It was gone before it fully arrived, swallowed back down to wherever she kept the things she didn't let herself feel anymore. But Wade saw it, and it lodged itself in his chest like a splinter he didn't know yet what to do about. He worked on her wrists carefully. She didn't flinch, not once. Not even when the water hit the raw skin. He filed that away alongside everything else, the particular and terrible absence of flinching where flinching should have been. "You hungry?" June asked. A pause. "Yes." "Good." June pushed the plate closer to her without ceremony. No comment about it. No making her feel anything about needing food. Just moving it closer like it was the most natural thing in the world. Wade looked away. Anna used to do exactly that. Push food toward people without making them feel a thing about needing it. He wrapped Nora's wrists in clean cloth and leaned back. She was on the second piece of cornbread now. June had settled onto the bench beside her, not touching her, just close, and was telling her about the ranch, the 2 horses, the 4 chickens, the way the well went brackish every July except for the bottom pull, which stayed cold all year. Nora listened. She didn't say much. But she listened with her whole body the way people listened when they'd been somewhere very quiet for a very long time. Then June turned and looked at Nora's face. Direct, the way June looked at things. And she said something that stopped everything in that kitchen completely. "You got Mama's eyes." The room went still. Nora went very still. Wade's hands stopped moving. June reached up and touched Nora's face. Just her fingers resting against Nora's cheek for a moment. Gentle and absolutely certain at the same time. "Mama had green eyes," June said quietly. "Like the creek in spring, when the snows just melted. I was scared I was starting to forget what color they were." Her fingers dropped away. "I remember now." Nora's throat moved. She looked at Wade. He looked back at her. His voice, when it came, was rougher than he meant it to be. "Her mother passed 6 months ago," he said. "I'm sorry," Nora said. He stood up and went to the stove, so neither of them had to look at his face for the next minute or so. He gave her the spare room. It had been Anna's sewing room, and he hadn't touched it since February, and it still smelled faintly of cedar and the lavender water Anna used to keep on the windowsill. He hoped Nora didn't notice. He wasn't entirely sure he hoped that. June showed her where the wash basin was, where the extra blanket was folded at the foot of the bed, and where the latch sat on the inside of the door. "You can lock it from the inside," June said. Nora looked at the latch. "Did you need to?" June thought about it the way she thought about serious things with her whole face. "Not really. But Papa put it there when I was little so I could lock my own door and feel safe." A pause. "He does that. Gets things ready before you know you need them." Nora stood very still, looking at the latch. Then she looked at June. "Thank you," she said, "for hearing me." June nodded like this was a simple and obvious thing. Everybody makes a sound when they're scared, even when they think they're not. She pulled the door halfway shut behind her. Nora crossed the room. She put her bandaged fingers against the latch. She turned it. Wade was on the porch when June came back out. He was sitting in the chair with coffee. He'd stopped tasting, watching the road the way he'd been watching roads since he was a Pinkerton man, looking for things that didn't fit. "Papa." She's scared of something she didn't leave behind." He looked at his daughter. "What makes you say that?" June sat on the porch step and hugged her knees. Way she looked at the road when we came through the gate. She wasn't looking to see where she was. She paused. She was looking to see if something was coming. He turned his coffee cup in both hands. Papa, what do we do if someone comes looking for her? He didn't answer right away. He looked at the road. He looked at the tree line. He looked at his daughter, who was 8 years old, and asked questions that had no comfortable answers, and he thought about what Anna would have said. Anna would have said, "You do what's right, Wade, even when you can't see the whole shape of it yet. We handle it," he said. "One thing at a time." June nodded, satisfied. Because June trusted him, not because he always had the answer, but because he always stayed to figure it out. "You did right today," he said, stopping me. She looked at him like he'd said something slightly unnecessary. "I know," she said. He almost smiled, the first time in a while. Then he thought about the brand. He hadn't mentioned it to June. He was still finding the right words, and he suspected there were no right words, only words that were less wrong than others. But he'd seen it when he'd cleaned Nora's wrists, high on her left forearm, half hidden under the rope damage. A mark burned into the skin with deliberate, careful precision. Not an accident, not a scar from a fire or a fall. A mark of ownership. The kind men burned into cattle so the world would know who those cattle belonged to. Someone had marked this woman, and someone sooner or later was going to come down that road believing she was still theirs. He didn't sleep that night. He lay in his bed and listened to the ranch settle around him, the creak of the timber, the horses shifting in the barn, the dry summer wind moving through the grass. And he thought about what kind of man put a woman in a burlap sack and left her on a dirt road in the Wyoming August. He came up with answers he didn't like. Around midnight, he heard movement in the house. He was up and in the hallway in 3 seconds, rifle in hand, before he'd fully registered what he was hearing. Light footsteps. Careful. Someone who knew the house was occupied and wasn't trying to wake it. He stepped into the kitchen doorway. Nora was standing at the window, just standing. Her bandaged hands pressed flat against the sill, her face close to the glass, looking out at the dark yard. He lowered the rifle. "Can't sleep," he said. She didn't startle. She'd heard him coming. "No." He came in, set the rifle against the wall, deliberate and visible, sat down at the table. "You don't have to talk. I'm just sitting." She was quiet for a long time. Outside, something moved in the barn, one of the horses shifting. "How long were you in there?" he said finally. "In the sack." She turned from the window. "Since before sunrise." He worked out the hours, better part of a day, in August heat, bound in a burlap sack on the side of a road that most people didn't travel before noon. "Whoever did it wanted to be certain," he said. "Yes." "And you know who did it?" She didn't answer. She didn't deny it either. And that was its own answer. He looked at her straight. "Nora, I need you to understand something. I don't know your story. I don't know what you've done or what's been done to you. I've got a daughter down that hall, and she matters more to me than anything else on this earth." He paused. "But I know what rope marks look like on a person who's been tied more than once. And I know what that mark on your arm is." The air in the kitchen changed. Nora's chin came up. Her jaw went tight. "You saw it," she said. "I did." She held very still, waiting for what came next. He could see her bracing for it. "No person gets marked like that," Wade said, "unless somebody decided they had the right to own another human being." He pressed both palms flat on the table. "Nobody has that right. Not in this territory. Not anywhere on God's earth." She stared at him. "I'm not sending you back," he said. "Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until you stand up and tell me yourself that's what you want." Her eyes, those green eyes his daughter had said, looked like the creek in spring went wet at the edges. Just the edges. She held it back. She was very practiced at holding things back. He could see how much practice it had taken. "You don't know what you're agreeing to," she said. "Probably not. People will come looking for me. I imagine they will. Bad people." She met his eyes. "People with badges, Wade." He let that sit. The mention of badges was specific, deliberate. It meant she knew exactly who was coming, and she knew what they carried, and she'd been outrunning that knowledge for a while now. "Tell me when you're ready," he said. "I'll be right here." She turned back to the window. He stayed. He sat with her in the kitchen while the August dark pressed down on the yard and the stars moved in their slow arc overhead, and the rooster in the barnyard began his early argument with the world. She never told him more that night. He didn't push. But before she went back to the spare room, she stopped in the kitchen doorway. "Wade," she said. It was the first time she'd used his name. "Yeah," he said. "When they come." She didn't look at him. "They'll tell you things about me, things that'll sound true. They might even have papers." A pause thin as wire. "I need you to know I'm not what they'll say I am." He nodded once. "I know." She looked at him then, searching his face for the lie. The way people searched who had been lied to enough times that honesty started to look suspicious. She searched him the way she'd been searching every face for a long time. She didn't find it. She went back to the room. He heard the latch turn. He stayed in the kitchen. He watched the sun come up slow and gold over his land. He thought about Anna. He thought about June. He thought about a brand burned into a young woman's skin and 14 names she hadn't told him about yet, and a man somewhere who wore a badge and believed he still had a claim. He made his decision before the coffee finished brewing. Whatever was coming down that road, he was going to meet it standing up. The first rider came through the gate before the coffee finished its second boil. Wade was still at the kitchen table when he heard the hooves, not hurried, deliberate, the particular pace of a man who wanted to be heard coming and wasn't worried about what happened when he arrived. Wade was on the porch with his rifle before the rider cleared the gate post, and he stood there with the morning light behind him and watched the man cross the yard. Pressed shirt. Clean hat despite the road dust. A smile that arrived before it was needed and stayed a half-second longer than it was welcome. "Morning," the man called out. He stopped his horse at the edge of the yard and touched his hat brim. "Name's Dillard. Riding for Colonel Morrow's office. I'm looking for a young woman. Dark auburn hair. Might be injured." Wade said nothing. Dillard's eyes moved across the yard with the slow patience of a man doing an inventory he'd been trained to do without looking like he was doing it. The barn, the wagon, the windows of the house. "She'd have marks on her wrists," he said. "Rope marks." "Lot of people in this territory," Wade said. "She'd be traveling alone, probably frightened." Dillard reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. He held it up without offering it. "There's a reward posted. Colonel Morrow is very concerned for her welfare." Wade looked at the paper. He looked at Dillard. He looked at the way Dillard's right thumb was resting on his belt, 2 inches from his holster, in the particular way of men who wanted that fact noticed, without being noticed noticing it. "Can't say I've seen anyone matching that," Wade said. Dillard held his gaze for a beat that lasted 1 second too long. "I see." He folded the paper back and tucked it away. "Well, if you happen to come across her, she's wanted for questioning, in connection with a theft from Colonel Morrow's offices." He produced a second paper smaller and set it on the fence post at the gate. "Reward stands either way. Good day to you, Mr. Calloway." He rode back down the road without looking back. Wade waited until the dust settled. Then he walked to the gate, picked up the paper, and unfolded it. He read it twice. Then he read it a third time, because the first 2 times he wanted to believe he'd misread it. The name at the top wasn't a court document. It wasn't a county warrant. It was a single man's letterhead. Colonel Silas Morrow, Federal Land Commissioner, and Chairman Wyoming Women's Settlement Society. And beneath the description of Nora Bell auburn hair, green eyes identifying mark on left forearm, were 4 words that rearranged everything Wade thought he understood about what was coming. Return her. Discretion required. Not bring to justice. Not deliver to the county sheriff. Return her. Like she was a horse that had slipped its fence. Like she was something misplaced that needed putting back. Wade folded the paper. He pressed it flat against his chest and stood at his own gate for a full minute looking at the road. Then he walked back to the house and stood in his kitchen and looked down the hall at the closed door of the spare room. The latch was turned. She was still there. He put the paper on the table and started thinking very hard. He was still thinking when Nora appeared in the kitchen doorway. She'd changed into the spare dress June had quietly left outside the room the evening before, one of Anna's summer dresses, pale blue cotton, slightly too wide across the shoulders. She'd washed her face and combed her hair, and she looked younger than she had the day before, in the way that clean faces sometimes revealed things that road dust had been covering. Not younger in a way that was comfortable. Younger in the way that made his chest tight, because a woman this age had no business carrying what she was clearly carrying. Her eyes went straight to the paper on the table. She didn't ask. She just looked at it, and then looked at him, and her face said she already knew what it was. "Dillard," she said. "That his name. He's Morrow's errand man. He does the things Morrow doesn't want attached to his own name." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She folded her bandaged hands on the table and looked at them. "He was here fast." "Faster than I'd have liked," Wade said. "He'll report back. Morrow will know by noon where I am." She looked up. "He always knows." "Tell me about Morrow," Wade said. "Not all of it. Enough that I know what's standing in front of me when he comes." Nora was quiet for a moment. June padded in from the hallway in her bare feet and went directly to the stove without being asked, pulling down the pan with the efficiency of a child who'd been making her own breakfast since February. She didn't look at either of them, but her shoulders were listening. "Colonel Silas Morrow," Nora said, "has been federal land commissioner for this district for 9 years. He is also the founder and chairman of the Wyoming Women's Settlement Society." Her voice had the flat, careful quality of someone reciting facts they'd memorized because facts were the only safe thing. On paper, the society relocates women traveling west alone, widows, women leaving bad situations back east. It gives them placement employment, a new start. Wade set his coffee down carefully. "And what does it do off paper?" The pan hissed on the stove. June didn't turn around, but her back had gone very still. "The women who come through the society sign a labor contract," Nora said. "Standard language. 6 months of domestic service to offset the cost of their relocation. Transportation, housing, meals. All charged back to the woman at rates she can't see until she's already arrived somewhere she doesn't know." She looked at her hands. "The contracts are designed so the debt grows faster than it can be paid. By the end of 6 months, a woman owes more than when she started. Morrow calls it a renewal clause. She signs again, or she doesn't leave." "How many women?" Wade said. "That I know of 14. That I've confirmed." She looked up at him. "There may be more in the earlier records." June turned from the stove. She put a plate of eggs in front of Nora, then one in front of Wade, then sat down between them with her own plate. She looked at both of them and said very calmly, "I heard what she said." Wade looked at his daughter. "June." "I'm 8, June said. "Not a baby." She picked up her fork. "Are there little ones younger than me?" Nora held her gaze. "Some of the women have children with them." "Yes." June nodded once. The way she nodded when she'd made a decision, she wasn't going to revisit. She ate a bite of egg. Then she said, still looking at her plate, "Then we have to stop him." Wade opened his mouth. "Papa." June said it in the voice she'd inherited directly from Anna, the one that didn't leave room. "We have to stop him." The kitchen went quiet except for the yard sounds outside. Wind, the horses, the loose step on the porch creaking as the morning heated up. Wade looked at his daughter, who was 8 years old and certain as compass north. He thought about what Anna would have said. He already knew what Anna would have said. "Yeah," he said. "We do." The trouble came from town before noon. Wade heard the wagon on the road, and he knew from the speed of it that it wasn't bringing supplies or conversation. He walked out to the fence line and waited. It was Dorothy Price's wagon. Dot herself on the bench, driving the way she drove everything, like she'd already decided where she was going, and the horse's opinion on the matter was noted but not binding. She pulled up hard and looked down at him with her sharp gray eyes and the expression she reserved for men who were about to complicate her afternoon. "Wade Calloway," she said, "tell me the rumors I'm hearing out of Dillard's mouth aren't true." "Depend on the rumor." "He's telling half of Harrow Creek you're harboring a woman wanted by Colonel Morrow." She climbed down from the wagon without waiting. Dorothy Price had not waited for assistance with anything in 30 years, and she wasn't starting now. She planted herself in front of him with her arms crossed. "A woman who stole from his offices." "She didn't steal anything," Wade said. Dillard says what Morrow tells him to say." Wade kept his voice level. "I found her tied in a burlap sack on the South Road, bound, marked, left in the August heat to die or to be collected, whichever came first." He said it plain because the facts were ugly enough without dressing them up. "That sound like a woman who stole something, Dot? Or does that sound like a woman somebody needed silenced?" Dorothy Price went very still. The fight went out of her face. What replaced it was harder and less comfortable. The face of a woman doing arithmetic she didn't want the answer to. "Marked how?" she said. "Branded, high on the left forearm." Her mouth pressed into a flat line. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had pulled itself in tight. "The Settlement Society," she said. Wade looked at her. "You knew?" "I had suspicions. 2 years of them." Her jaw was set. "Nothing I could prove. Morrow has documents for everything. Letters from churchmen. Testimonials from county officials. You say one word against him in this territory, and he buries you under legal process and community opinion, and you come out the other side looking like a fool, or worse." She looked at him hard. "And now you've got the woman." "And now I've got the woman." Dorothy turned and looked down the road toward town. Wade watched the calculation move across her face. Everything she stood to lose. Everything she might still choose to do. He'd known Dorothy Price for 9 years. She was not a gentle woman or a comfortable one, but she was under all that iron a fair one. She didn't let herself look away from things that deserved to be looked at. "I need to talk to her," Dorothy said. "She's not obligated." "I know she's not obligated." Her voice cracked on the last word, just slightly. Just once. She pulled it back together immediately. "I need to talk to her, Wade, because I have been walking past the Settlement Society office for 2 years and done nothing, and I need to sit across from this woman and say that out loud to someone who has the right to hear it." Wade stepped back from the fence. "Come on then." Nora was on the porch with June when they came around the side of the house. June had been teaching her a string game with a piece of twine, and Nora's bandaged hands were holding the string while June worked her fingers through it with the focused precision of a surgeon. The ease between them was already something. It had been less than 24 hours, and they already had a language. Nora looked up when she heard footsteps, and every bit of that ease dropped out of her posture at once. Dorothy stopped at the foot of the porch steps. She looked at Nora for a long moment without speaking. Then her eyes went to the left forearm, to the edge of the bandage where the mark would be underneath, and something in her face closed permanently and opened somewhere else entirely. "I know what's under that bandage," Dorothy said. Nora went very still. "I've seen that mark before, on a woman who came through my store last spring. Sleeve pulled back when she reached for something on the upper shelf." Dorothy's jaw was hard. "I asked about it. She told me it was an old burn. An accident." The word came out like something she was spitting out. "I let her tell me that." Nora looked at her hands. Most people do. Not anymore. Dorothy climbed the porch steps and sat down in the other chair like she'd been invited because Dorothy Price had decided she was invited, and that was that. She looked at Nora directly. My name is Dorothy Price. I run the general store. I have no legal standing, no political connections, and one very bad habit of saying what I think, regardless of the consequences. She folded her hands in her lap. Tell me what you need. Something loosened in Nora's face, small and careful, like a window opening 1 inch to check the weather before committing. I need a doctor, Nora said. One who won't report back tomorrow. Benjamin Aldridge, Dorothy said without hesitating. Came out from Cincinnati 4 years ago. Morrow tried to recruit him for the Society's medical consultations. Ben turned him down flat and hasn't been asked again. He'll come. I need somewhere to send something, Nora said. Something I've been carrying. She looked at Wade for a moment, then back at Dorothy. Papers. A copy of a ledger. Names, dates, contracts, records of every woman placed through the Society for the past 6 years. Proof of what he's been doing, and proof of what he's been collecting. The porch went so quiet you could hear the grasshoppers in the dry field past the fence line. How many names? Dorothy said. 14 confirmed. Possibly more. Nora looked at her steadily. The records go back further than I could access. I took what I could reach. Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Where are the papers? Hidden. Not here. Nora's hands pressed together on the table. I can't go back for them myself. If Morrow's men see me anywhere near where I hid them, they disappear, and so do I. She looked at both of them. Someone else has to go. I make a supply run to Sheridan every 2 weeks, Dorothy said. Nobody looks twice at my wagon. She looked at Nora. Tell me where. They sat at the kitchen table for the better part of an hour after that. Nora talked, and Dorothy listened, and Wade listened, and the picture that assembled itself in that kitchen on a hot Wyoming morning was more deliberate than he'd expected, and more damning than he'd feared. Because Nora had been meticulous. Careful in a way that spoke of someone who had understood from the very beginning that the only weapon she was ever going to have was the truth documented precisely and kept safe. She described the ledger. She described the location of the copy she'd hidden a loose floorboard in the back office of a dry goods store in a small town 40 miles north, a building she'd worked in during a 3-month placement the previous year owned by a man named Garrett, who had not known what she was concealing, but had seen enough of the world to ask no questions about it. When she was done, Dorothy sat back and looked at the table. This will ruin him, she said quietly. That's the intention, Nora said. It'll also put a mark on every person in this room. Dorothy looked at Wade. He looked back at her. I understand that, he said. And you're still sitting there. I'm still sitting there. Dorothy pushed back her chair and stood up. She picked up her hat from the table and set it on her head with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had been settling her own affairs for a very long time. She looked at Nora. Why are you doing this? Nora said. You don't owe me anything. Dorothy looked at her with the particular directness of someone who had decided long ago that softening things for people was a form of disrespect. A woman in my store, she said. Sleeve pulled back. And I let her tell me it was an accident. She walked to the door. I don't intend to make that mistake again. She was through the door and down the steps before either of them could answer. Wade listened to her wagon pull back down the road. He listened to it get smaller and then disappear. He thought about 14 names and a ledger, and a man who had 9 years of respectability and federal appointments stacked on top of whatever he was underneath all of it. She means it, Nora said. Dorothy doesn't say things she doesn't mean, Wade said. It's her best quality and her most exhausting one. Nora almost smiled. He was getting better at catching those moments before they disappeared. She should rest, he said. The doctor would come tomorrow. She'd need to be clear-headed for whatever came after. She nodded, but didn't move from the table. She sat with her bandaged hands in front of her and looked at the grain of the wood, and he could see something working in her. Some weight she was deciding whether to put down or carry a little further. "There was a woman," she said quietly, "at the Settlement Society's boarding house in Cheyenne. Her name was Clara Hess, 40 years old, 2 children, 7 and 9. She came west after her husband died. She thought the society was going to help her." Nora stopped. Her jaw worked. "When I left, she was still there. She'd been there 11 months. The debt kept growing." She pressed her lips together. "I don't know if she's still—" She stopped again. Wade said nothing. He just sat there the way you sat with grief that didn't need advice. "If the ledger reaches someone who can act on it," Nora said, "they'll have to account for every name on that list." "Every one," Wade said. She looked at him. "You really believe that?" He thought about it the way he thought about things that mattered without rushing toward a comfortable answer. "I believe there are enough people like Dorothy Price in this world to make it possible," he said. "And I believe you're the reason those 14 names aren't already buried somewhere permanent." Her throat moved. Then June appeared in the kitchen doorway. She'd been gone approximately 12 minutes, which Wade privately thought showed remarkable restraint. She crossed to Nora's side of the table and sat down and held out the piece of twine. "I didn't show you the double-cross pattern yet," she said. "It's harder, but it's prettier." Nora looked at her. Something broke open in her expression for just a second, real and unguarded, the kind that appeared when you weren't expecting to be moved and got moved anyway. She took the twine. "Show me," she said. Outside, the afternoon light shifted. Somewhere past the fence line, a hawk called once and went quiet. And in the kitchen of a ranch on the Wyoming border, a woman who had been left in a sack on the South Road sat beside a child with her dead mother's eyes and learned a string pattern she would remember for the rest of her life. The rider came at dusk. This one didn't come with Dillard's careful, easy smile. This one came alone, and came without hurry, which was more frightening than speed. He sat his horse at the gate, and he didn't call out. He just sat there against the going-down sun and waited, and the last red light caught the star on his chest and threw it back. Not one of Morrow's hired men. Not an errand rider. The badge was federal. Wade stepped out onto the porch with his rifle and looked at him across the yard. The man removed his hat. His voice, when it came, was deep and unhurried, the voice of someone who had long since learned that volume was rarely necessary when authority was doing the work. "Mr. Calloway," he said. "My name is Colonel Silas Morrow. I was hoping we might have a conversation." The air changed. Everything changed. Behind Wade, through the closed kitchen door, he heard the room go absolutely silent. He understood in that moment that the thing he'd been preparing for since morning had arrived. He stood on his porch with his rifle at his side and felt the full weight of what he'd committed to when he'd made his decision over coffee before dawn. He tipped his chin toward the gate. "It's open," he said. Silas Morrow rode through the gate like a man visiting property he already owned, and was simply choosing to be polite about it. He was not what Wade had expected, and Wade suspected that was entirely deliberate. No bluster, no hard jaw, no hand resting near iron. Morrow was perhaps 55, well-built, well-dressed, with the kind of face that had been constructed over decades for the specific purpose of making people trust it. Warm eyes, a smile that arrived slightly before it was needed. He dismounted easy and tied his own horse to the post, a man comfortable enough with his own authority that he didn't need anyone else to hold his animal, and crossed the yard with his hat in his hand. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "thank you for seeing me." "Didn't have much choice," Wade said. "A man sits at my gate long enough, I either come out or I don't. Either way, tells him something." Morrow smiled. It reached his eyes, and that was the most troubling part. "You're direct. I appreciate that." He stopped at the foot of the porch steps and looked up at Wade without being intimidated by the rifle, just acknowledging it, the way a man acknowledged weather. "Mind if I sit? It's been a long ride." "I do mind," Wade said. "Say what you came to say." Something moved behind Morrow's eyes, a flicker gone fast. But Wade caught it and filed it away. "All right," Morrow said, "man to man." He settled his hat back on his head and clasped his hands in front of him, easy and open, the posture of a man who had nothing to hide, and wanted you to understand that. "I'm looking for a young woman named Nora Bell. She was under the Society's care for 8 months. Last week she broke into my administrative offices, stole confidential documents belonging to private clients, and assaulted 2 of my staff members on her way out." He paused. His voice was full of something that sounded almost like sorrow. "Nora has had a very difficult life, Mr. Calloway. Difficult lives sometimes produce instability. She's told elaborate stories before. It's part of her condition." The word landed exactly the way he'd meant it to. Soft. Clinical. The kind of word that reframed a person without raising a voice. "Instability," Wade said. "Mental and emotional distress." Morrow's voice was all careful sympathy. "I'd hate for a decent man to put his family at risk based on the word of someone who cannot, through no fault of her own, be fully relied upon." Wade looked at him for a long moment. "What did your staff members do to her before she left?" The smile stayed, but it went still. "I'm sorry. Your staff members. The ones she assaulted." Wade's voice hadn't changed. Same flat, even register he used for everything. "What did they do to her before she fought back?" Morrow tilted his head slightly. The warmth dialed back 1 degree. Not enough for a stranger to notice. Enough for a man who was paying attention. "I can see she's already spoken with you." "I can see you didn't answer my question." "Mr. Calloway." "What did they do to her?" Wade said again. Morrow looked at him for a long, careful moment. Then he took a slow breath, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Not much. Just enough. The warmth was still present, but underneath it now was something harder. The actual ground beneath the performance. "I have a federal warrant," Morrow said. He reached into his coat, slowly watching Wade, and produced a folded document. He held it out. "Signed by District Judge Harlan Fitch. Authorizing the detention and return of Nora Bell on charges of theft and aggravated assault." Wade didn't take it. "Leave it on the rail." Morrow set it on the porch railing. "I have 3 deputies in Harrow Creek as of this afternoon. I have the full backing of the federal district office." He said it without raising his voice. That was the most frightening version of a threat. The one delivered quietly by someone who didn't need volume. "I don't want trouble with you. You seem like a reasonable man. You have a daughter." His eyes moved briefly to the front window and back. "I'd like this resolved peacefully." "Then ride back to Harrow Creek," Wade said, "and wait for me to come to you with what I decide. I can give you until tomorrow morning. I didn't ask for a timeline." Morrow held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he settled his hat and nodded once with the expression of a man making a very specific mental note. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "I hope you make the right choice, Mr. Calloway." He untied his horse and mounted smooth and easy, and rode back through the gate without looking back. Wade stood on the porch and watched him go, and did not move until the sound of hooves had completely faded. Then the front door opened behind him. Nora stood in the doorway. Her face had gone the color of creek limestone. "You heard?" he said. "Every word." He turned. "Did he tell the truth about his staff?" Her jaw went rigid. She looked at the middle distance for a moment, like she was deciding how much of something to lift and carry into the open air. Then she looked at him directly. "There was a man named Greer. He believed the women at the Society's boarding house were placed there for his personal convenience." She said it without inflection, reading it the way you read a legal document when you needed the facts to stay facts and not become something else. "When I told Morrow, he told me I was confused. When I told him a second time, he locked me in the supply room for 3 days. A beat. The third time Greer came near me, I hit him with an iron door latch, and I ran." Wade put his rifle against the wall. "How badly did you hurt him?" Not badly enough. She pressed one hand against the doorframe. He was walking when I left. The warrant is a pretext. Morrow needs me back before the ledger surfaces. Greer is the excuse. Her voice stayed controlled, but something underneath it was fraying at the edges. He's going to keep coming, Wade. You know that. I know. He has deputies in town. I know that too. Wade. Something broke through the controlled surface then. Not collapse, not panic. Something honest and bone-tired underneath. I don't want your daughter hurt because of me. I don't want your ranch. Stop, he said. His voice was quiet and final. You don't understand what he does to people who... Nora. He said it the way he said things that were done being discussed. I made my decision this morning. I'm not in the habit of unmaking them. She stared at him, searching his face for the place where the resolve would crack. She didn't find it. He picked up the warrant from the railing, folded it, put it in his pocket alongside the reward paper from that morning. Right now, I need you to write down everything you told Dorothy today. Everything about the ledger, the location, the names, all of it on paper. Why? Because if something happens to me, he said, Dorothy needs enough to go on without either of us. He looked at her steadily. You understand. She held his gaze for a moment, then she nodded. He didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table with pen and paper and worked through what he had and what he needed. Nora sat across from him and wrote for over an hour. Everything she could recall from the ledger in order without prompting. Her handwriting was small and precise, and she didn't pause to think which told him she'd been carrying those 14 names in her head for a long time, the way you carried the names of the dead organized permanent, never misfiled. Around midnight, June came in and sat between them without asking permission. Nobody sent her back to bed. She sat with her elbows on the table and watched them work and didn't ask questions and didn't try to help. She was just there, present the way she'd always been present near injured things. Steady and quiet, and entirely certain she was supposed to be exactly where she was. At one point, Nora looked up and saw June watching her, and something in Nora's face went soft in a way that had nothing to do with sentiment and everything to do with recognition. She looked at June the way a person looked at something they hadn't expected to find and didn't know yet what to do with. You should sleep, Nora said. I sleep fine, June said. I just don't want to right now. Nora looked at her a moment longer. Then she went back to writing. It was June who broke the silence 20 minutes later. In the particular way she broke silences not with noise, but with precision. He's going to lie about you in town, she said to Nora. Isn't he? Nora didn't look up. He already has. Will people believe him? Some. Enough. Nora set her pen down. He's been the most respected man in this district for 9 years. He knows which people need a favor, which people owe him one, which people are afraid of him. He's very good at what he does. She said it without bitterness. Just honesty. What about Dr. Aldridge? Wade said. Dorothy said she'd ride out to him last evening. She went, June said. Both adults looked at her. I watched from the window, June said without apology. She came back fast, which means it went well because Dorothy rides slow when she's disappointed. Wade looked at his daughter with an expression that lived exactly halfway between exasperation and pride. When did you turn into a scout? I pay attention, June said. There's a difference. Nora almost smiled, close enough that Wade counted it. Dr. Benjamin Aldridge arrived before 7 the next morning in a battered wagon with the expression of a man who had long since made his peace with being called out before breakfast. He was 60 or so, lean, deliberate in his movements with eyes that took everything in without broadcasting his conclusions. He shook Wade's hand on the porch, said nothing unnecessary, and went inside. He spent 35 minutes with Nora in the spare room with the door closed. When he came out, he sat at the kitchen table and accepted the coffee June poured without being asked. He was quiet for a moment before he spoke. The injuries to her wrists are consistent with extended restraint, he said. The rope damage is layered, not from one incident, several over time. He set his cup down. The mark on her forearm was applied with a purpose-made iron. The precision of it indicates intent, not accident. He looked at Wade directly. I've documented everything. Measurements, descriptions, my professional assessment of causation and duration. It will hold up before a county judge or a federal review board. Will you testify to it? Wade said. Aldridge was quiet for exactly the length of time it took a man to know exactly what he was agreeing to and agree to it anyway. Yes, he said. I will. Then his expression shifted, and Wade felt the change in the room before Aldridge said the next word. There's something else, Aldridge said. Wade waited. Aldridge looked at his coffee. I treated one of Morrow's staff members 2 months ago, a man named Greer. Routine call, he said. While I was at the Society's Sheridan house, I saw 2 women who'd been brought in under labor contracts. He stopped. His jaw worked. One of them had wrist damage consistent with what I documented on Miss Bell this morning. The other had contusions along her back and shoulders that were not consistent with domestic work or any kind of accident. He looked up. I reported it to the district office. I was told the matter was under review. Was it? Wade said. There was no review. Aldridge pressed both hands flat on the table. I told myself there was a process, that the right people were looking into it. I let myself believe that because it was easier than what came next. His voice had gone tighter. The right people were Morrow. The kitchen went absolutely silent. June, who had been standing at the edge of the room, walked quietly out the back door. Wade let her go. He understood the particular thing she was carrying out with her. The feeling of understanding something you couldn't unfeel. How fast can you get that documentation to a federal office outside this district? Wade said. If I ride to Casper this morning, I can have it in front of Judge Aldrich by tomorrow morning. He and Morrow have no connection. Different appointments, different sponsors entirely. Aldridge looked at him steadily. But once I do that, Morrow will know. And he will move fast. How fast? By tonight, if he wants to shut it down before Aldrich can act on it. Wade did the math. Dorothy wouldn't reach the ledger until tomorrow. Aldridge could reach Casper by tomorrow morning. That left a window. Not wide, not comfortable, but a window. Then you leave within the hour, Wade said. Aldridge nodded and stood. Then the back door opened, and June came in. She was holding something in both hands, a folded piece of oilcloth bound with twine. She set it on the table in front of Nora. Nora stared at it. Her face changed completely all at once, the way faces changed when something impossible turned out to be real. Where did you get that? Nora said. It wasn't a question. It was barely sound. You had it in the pocket of your dress, June said, with the matter-of-fact calm of someone reporting a weather observation. The dress you came in. I found it when I was washing it this morning. A pause. I didn't open it. The cloth was sealed, but it felt important. She stepped back from the table. Nora put both bandaged hands on the oilcloth package. Her fingers pressed against it slowly, confirming it was real. Then she looked up at Wade. It's the ledger copy, she said. Her voice had dropped to something just above a breath. Not the one in Sheridan. The other copy. She swallowed. I made 2. I didn't tell anyone I made 2. The air in the kitchen compressed. Aldridge had gone completely still. Wade looked at Nora. You've had it this whole time. Sewn into the pocket of my dress. She looked at the package. When they put me in the sack, they took my boots and my bag. They didn't check my dress. Her fingers tightened on the oilcloth. I'd forgotten it was there. When Morrow's men grabbed me, I wasn't thinking about the ledger. I was thinking about getting air. And then June found me, and I wasn't thinking about anything except staying conscious long enough to... She stopped, pressed her lips together. I forgot it was there. June, Aldridge said. He crossed to the table in 3 steps and looked at the package. If that's a complete copy. Every page, Nora said. Then we don't need Sheridan. He looked at Wade. This goes with me to Casper today, right now. Wade put his hand out. Nora looked at it. Then she looked at him. He held her gaze. I'll get it back to you, he said. When it's done its work. She picked up the package. She put it in his hand and held on for 1 second before letting go. 1 second only. Aldridge took it from Wade and put it inside his coat and buttoned his coat over it with the efficiency of a man who understood what he was now carrying. I'll take the North Trail, he said. If Morrow's men are watching the main road, take the creek bed past Henderson's land, Wade said. Comes out on the far side of town. They won't expect it. Aldridge nodded. He shook Wade's hand. The grip of a man sealing something, and looked at Nora. I should have acted sooner, he said. I'm sorry. Nora looked at him steadily. Act now, she said. That's enough. He was out the door in under a minute. The silence he left behind lasted exactly 4 minutes. Then they heard horses on the main road. More than one moving together in the organized rhythm of men riding in formation. Wade went to the window. 3 riders moving slow and deliberate toward the gate. Not Morrow, his deputies. And one of them was carrying something long and flat in his right hand. Not a rifle. A document. Stay in the back of the house, Wade said. He didn't look away from the window. Don't come out regardless of what you hear. Wade. He turned and looked at her. Aldridge has the ledger and a 20-minute head start. Whatever happens in the next 10 minutes, that matters more than anything else in this yard. You understand? Her jaw was set. Every part of her wanted to argue. He could see the moment she understood why she couldn't, and he saw the exact second she made the decision to trust him with it. One short nod. She moved back down the hall. He heard the latch turn. He picked up his rifle. He walked out to the porch. The 3 deputies were at the gate. The one in front dismounted and came forward with the document held up like a shield. Wade Calloway, I have a judicial order authorizing search of this property for Nora Bell wanted on federal warrant. You are required by law to stand aside. Wade looked at the paper from the porch. He didn't come down the steps. That order signed by Judge Fitch in Harrow Creek. The deputy stopped. Because a judge who was appointed to his bench by the man issuing the warrant. Wade said, keeping his voice level, and carrying it just far enough that all 3 men could hear every word clearly. Has a financial interest in the outcome, which makes that paper worth considerably less than the man who signed it. He looked at each of the 3 deputies in turn. I'm familiar with the statute. Are you? The deputy with the document glanced at the other 2. Quick. Involuntary. Wade caught it. They hadn't expected that. Sir, this warrant was signed this morning. Wade said, by Morrow's own district judge. A man Morrow put on the bench. He kept his rifle at his side, not raised, not lowered. Present. I have a doctor riding to Casper right now with documented evidence of federal crimes committed by Colonel Morrow against women in his custody. That evidence will be in front of Judge Aldrich before tomorrow morning. He looked at them steadily. You are welcome to come onto this property and conduct your search, but I want each of you to think carefully about whose name you want attached to this action 24 hours from now. The deputy with the papers stood very still. The one on the far right shifted his horse. The one on the left looked down the road the direction Aldridge had gone and then looked back. We'll return, the lead deputy said. His voice had lost something it had when he arrived. I'll be here, Wade said. They rode back toward town. He watched them all the way to the bend. Then he let out one long breath. His hands had not shaken. He filed that away. The front door opened behind him. Nora stood in the doorway, which meant she had heard every word, and had decided that his instructions applied specifically to the back of the house, and not to doorways in general. He decided this was not the moment to address that distinction. That bought us time, she said. Not much. No. She stepped out onto the porch. When Morrow finds out Aldridge is on the road to Casper, he'll move tonight, not through deputies. She looked at the road, then back at him. Himself. Wade nodded slowly. They both understood what that meant. The careful man with the warm eyes and the federal badge had just run out of patience, and a careful man out of patience was the most dangerous kind there was. "There's something I didn't tell Aldridge," Nora said. He turned. She stood very still. Her voice had gone to that controlled place it went when she was holding something that hurt to hold. "The ledger, the last entries, the most recent ones." She met his eyes. "The final 3 names aren't women under labor contracts." "Then what are they?" She looked at him straight. "They're women who tried to speak about what was happening, who went to officials, who wrote letters." She let that sit for exactly 1 second. 2 of them disappeared. The 3rd died in a fire in Sheridan 6 months ago. Ruled accidental. The word accidental hung in the August air between them, the same way it had when Aldridge had used it. Wade's hand tightened once on the rifle stock. Just once. "He kills people who talk," he said. "He has killed people who talk," Nora said. "Yes." Standing on that porch in the Wyoming heat, Wade Calloway understood for the first time with complete and total clarity that this was not a legal dispute. It was not a matter of warrants and judges and courtroom procedure. It was a man who had been doing whatever he wanted for 9 years to whoever he wanted, and who had never once, not one single time, been stopped. And he was coming tonight. Wade sent June to Dorothy's place before sunset. He didn't ask. He told her in the voice that wasn't negotiable, and she stood in the kitchen and looked at him for a long moment with Anna's eyes and his own stubbornness living together in her face. "For how long?" she said. "Until I come get you." That could be a long time. It could. She looked at Nora, who was standing in the kitchen doorway. Something passed between them in the way things passed between people who had built a language faster than language usually got built. June crossed the kitchen and stood in front of Nora and looked up at her with that direct, unblinking attention that had always made adults shift uncomfortably because children who looked at you like that were seeing things you hadn't shown them. Nora crouched down. She held June's face in both bandaged hands, careful and firm. "You listen to your papa," she said. "I always listen," June said. "I just don't always agree." "This time you agree." June searched her face. "Are you going to be here when I get back?" Nora held her gaze without flinching. "I'm going to try very hard to be." It was the most honest thing she could have said. June understood that because June understood the difference between a promise and a truth, and she had always preferred the truth. She nodded once, picked up her small bag from the floor, and let Wade walk her out to the horse without a single argument. He rode with her to the edge of the property. Watched her take the road toward Dorothy's at a good pace. Watched her all the way to where the road bent east, and she disappeared into the early dark. Then he rode back. Nora was on the porch when he came through the gate. Standing. The spare pistol in her hand. She'd found it where he kept it in the drawer beside the kitchen door, which meant she'd gone looking for it, which meant she'd made her own decisions about how this night was going to go without consulting him. He stopped his horse and looked at her. "Where'd you learn to handle a pistol?" he said. "The Society's boarding house in Laramie," she said, checking the load with the practiced ease of someone who had learned the skill under circumstances that made it necessary. "One of the kitchen workers." She said every woman had the right to know how to protect herself. She closed the chamber. Morrow dismissed her a month later. Said she was a disruptive influence. She looked up. She was the only adult in that place who ever told us the truth about anything. Wade tied his horse and came up the steps. "I'm not going to tell you to go inside." "Good," she said. "Because I wouldn't." He sat in the other chair. The August dark had settled in thick and warm, and the cicadas out past the fence line were going full voice, and any other evening it would have been the kind of quiet a man could rest inside. It wasn't that kind of evening. "He'll come with enough men that it looks clean," Wade said. "He won't come alone. He needs witnesses, his own men as witnesses." "I've been thinking about that," Nora said. "Since this afternoon when you called out his deputies about the warrant." "Yeah." They hesitated. She looked at him. "Not all three, but two of them. The ones on the right side." They looked at each other before the lead man spoke. She paused. "Those weren't Morrow's true believers. Those were men doing a job who haven't yet decided if the job is worth what it's costing them." Wade thought about that. "You think they're reachable. I think a man who hesitates at a moment like that is a man who hasn't fully chosen his side yet." She set the pistol across her knees. "Morrow is used to people who follow orders. He's not used to people who make him explain himself in front of witnesses." "Then we make him explain himself," Wade said, "in front of his own men." She looked at him. Something moved between them, the particular recognition of two people arriving at the same place, from different directions. "Dorothy will be back from Sheridan by morning," Nora said. "Whatever she finds in that dry goods store becomes corroboration." "Two separate copies," Wade said. "Aldridge's sworn documentation, Dorothy's eyewitness account." He looked at the road. 14 names. That's not something you bury under paperwork. That's something that ends a man's entire constructed life. "If it reaches the right people," Nora said. "Aldridge will make sure it does." He paused. "Angry men who also feel guilty move faster than comfortable men. Aldridge is both." Nora leaned her head back. She was quiet long enough that he thought exhaustion might have finally won one round against vigilance. Then she spoke. "I used to make up a story," she said, "when I was small, at the boarding house in Cheyenne before I understood what the society really was. I told the other women my father was a rancher out west somewhere, that he was coming for me, that he just didn't know where I was yet." A pause. "I described him so many times I could see him clearly. Big hands, steady voice, the kind of man who fixed things before you knew they were broken." She didn't look at him. "I stopped believing it when I was 17, but I kept telling it to the newer women because they needed it to be true even when I didn't." Wade said nothing for a while. The cicadas filled the space between them. "What happened to the ones you told the story to?" he said finally. "Some got out on their own, some are still there." Her voice stayed level. "Clara Hess is still there. She's been there 11 months. She pressed her lips together. I think about her every morning when I wake up, whether she's still waiting for someone to come." "When this is over," Wade said, "and Morrow's name is in front of a federal court, they'll have to account for every woman on that list. Every one." She looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I believe there are enough people like Dorothy Price in this world to make it possible," he said. "And I believe Clara Hess's name doesn't disappear because you put it on paper and refuse to let it." Something happened in Nora's face. A fracture small and deep. The kind that appeared when a person had been carrying a weight so long they'd stopped noticing it as separate from themselves, and then someone else acknowledged it out loud, and suddenly it had weight again, and shape, and the weight was enormous. She looked away before he could see the rest of it. "They're coming," she said. "Yeah," he said. "They are." She was quiet for a moment. Then in the voice she used when she was saying the thing underneath the thing, she said, "I need you to know something before they do. Whatever happens tonight, you and June were not part of what I intended when I was running. When I was in that sack, I was thinking about surviving long enough to get the ledger out. That was all." Her jaw worked. "I didn't mean to pull anyone else into the middle of this." Wade looked at her for a long moment. "You know what I was doing the morning June found you?" She shook her head. "Driving to town for flour and boot nails," he said. "Not exactly a man with a full life pressing on him." He looked at the dark yard. "Anna's been gone 6 months. The ranch runs. June's all right, but there's a version of a life, and there's a life, and I had one of them." A pause. "Reckon you showed up at a time when a man needed a reason to be more than just functional." The silence that followed was different from the other silences. Not tense, not strategic, just real. That might be the most feeling you've said at one time, Nora said. Don't get used to it, he said. She almost laughed. He heard the shape of it before she pulled it back, but it was there, real and unguarded, and it was exactly the sound he would have expected from her if she'd ever had years in which laughing was just something that happened without needing to be decided first. Then both horses in the barn started up at the same moment. They were on their feet before either had said a word. Wade heard them a second later. Multiple horses, coming from the north side this time. Not the main gate road, the back fence road that ran along the property line. They'd circled around. He'd half expected it. He looked at Nora. Back of the house, kitchen door. Wade, I'm not hiding you, he said. I'm positioning you. If they come through the front, I need someone at the back who can move. He held out his hand. She put the pistol in it. He looked at it, then held it back to her handle first. You know how to use it. Yes. Then keep it, and not before you have to. She went. He heard her cross the kitchen and take position at the back window exactly where he'd asked, and the fact that she'd done it exactly right without arguing about it told him something about how much she trusted him that he hadn't quite expected to feel the weight of. He went to the front of the porch and stood and waited. Morrow came through the back gate with 5 men. Not deputies this time. These were harder men, the kind hired specifically for outcomes rather than process. They spread out across the yard in practiced formation, 2 to each side, 1 staying with the horses. Morrow rode to the center and stopped. Mr. Calloway. His voice was exactly as it had been the previous evening. Measured, warm, reasonable. The voice of a man who believed in the power of appearing to have no reason to raise it. I asked you for a decision by morning. I've thought about it, and I find I can't wait that long. Breaking onto a man's property after dark, Wade said. That's not how federal marshals conduct themselves. I have authorization. You have paper you wrote yourself signed by a judge you appointed. Wade kept his voice flat and carrying. That's not authorization. That's theater. Something shifted in the yard. He felt it before he saw it. A change in the posture of the men spread out in the dark. The formation had come in confident. Now it was listening. Morrow's voice stayed smooth. Where is she? Gone, Wade said. A beat. I don't believe you. Doesn't change the truth of it. Wade stepped to the edge of the porch. She's not on this property. Your search will find nothing. But you didn't come here to conduct a legal search, Silas. He raised his voice just enough, not shouting, just carrying clearly to where 5 other men could hear every syllable. You came here to make a problem disappear before morning, because by morning, a federal circuit judge in Casper is going to have documentation of what you've been doing through the Wyoming Women's Settlement Society for the past 9 years. The yard went absolutely still. Morrow's horse shifted. He brought it steady, but his hands were tighter on the reins than they'd been 30 seconds ago. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Calloway. 14 women, Wade said. Named, contracted, trapped, and marked. Your handwriting in your own ledger. Your signature on every page. He let that land. 1 copy is already in Casper. The 2nd copy is on its way to the state capitol by morning. He watched Morrow's face. You're bluffing, Morrow said. But his voice had shifted 1 degree. The warmth was still there, but it was working harder now to stay in place. The woman you put in that sack, Wade said. You put her there because she had evidence you couldn't afford to surface. If she'd been just a runaway, you'd have let her run. He looked across the full line of men. He told you she was dangerous, a thief, unstable. But a man doesn't put a woman in a burlap sack in August heat because she stole something. He does it because he's afraid of what she's carrying. The man on the far left of the line moved his horse 1 step sideways, out of formation, just barely. But Wade noticed, and Morrow noticed, and every other man in that yard noticed. Briggs, Morrow said to the man low and sharp. Hold your position." The deputy Briggs didn't move back into line. He didn't move forward either. He sat his horse just outside the formation and said nothing. And that silence was the loudest thing in the yard. "How long have you been writing for him?" Wade said to Briggs. Briggs's jaw worked. 3 years. "You know about the settlement society?" A pause. "I knew he ran one." "You know about the ledger, the contracts, the women who couldn't leave?" A longer pause. The kind that was its own answer. "He didn't tell you what kind of work tonight was," Wade said. "It wasn't a question. That was deliberate. Men who know what they're doing tend to have second thoughts." He looked down the full line of them. "Any of you want to tell me Morrow warned you what you were riding into tonight?" Nobody spoke. "Because if you execute an illegal search on this property based on a fraudulent warrant," Wade said, "and by morning, a federal judge in Casper is looking at documented evidence of crimes against women in this man's custody, you are not deputies anymore. You are accessories, and accessories don't get to say they were just following orders, not in a federal court." Morrow moved his horse forward, closing the distance, and dropped his voice to something intended only for Wade. "Last chance," he said. "Give her to me. I'll forget everything that's been said tonight. You keep your ranch. You keep your daughter. You keep your life." His eyes were still warm. That was the thing about Morrow. The warmth never fully left, even when everything else fell away. It had been there so long, it had become structural. "Whatever she told you, it won't hold. She's one woman with a story, and I have 9 years of documented charitable work and the endorsement of 3 United States senators." "The ledger holds," Wade said. "It's in Casper." Morrow stared at him, and for the first time behind the warm eyes and the practiced ease, Wade saw what was actually underneath all of it. Not rage, not panic. Something colder and more deliberate than either. The particular fury of a man who had been in complete control for so long that the loss of it registered not as emotion, but as malfunction. Like a clock that had been running perfectly for a decade and had suddenly inexplicably stopped. Then the back door of the house opened. Nora came around the side of the house and walked into the yard. Not running, not hiding. She walked out into the August dark like she had every right to be standing in it, which she did, and she stopped 10 feet from Morrow's horse with the pistol at her side, and her chin up, and her green eyes steady as anything Wade had ever seen. Every man in that yard went still. Morrow looked at her. Something moved across his face. Relief and fury, and something else that had no business being there gone as fast as it came. "Nora," he said. He pulled the warmth back into his voice like putting on a coat he'd had for years. "There you are. I've been worried." "I was in a burlap sack on the South Road," she said. Her voice didn't shake, not 1 degree. "You put me there. Say that out loud." "Nora." "Say it, Silas." She looked at the line of men. "Tell these men why we're all standing in this yard tonight. Tell them what I have and why you need it back." She looked at each face in the line deliberately one at a time, giving each man a moment to see her clearly. "He runs the Wyoming Women's Settlement Society, has for 9 years. The women who come through it sign labor contracts they can't repay. The debt grows faster than it can be paid. The women can't leave. When they try, they disappear, or they get put in a sack and left on a road to be collected." She spoke without rushing. Every word landed clean and separate. "I have the ledger, the real one. 14 names, dates, amounts, his signature on every page. 2 copies. 1 in Casper with a federal judge. 1 already sent to the state capitol." Briggs made a sound, low and involuntary. The man beside him said under his breath something that might have been a prayer. Morrow's hand moved toward his coat. "Don't." Wade's rifle came up in one motion. Morrow's hands stopped. "Briggs," Wade said without lowering the rifle. You and your men are going to turn your horses around and ride back to Harrow Creek. In the morning, you're going to present yourselves to Sheriff Garrett, not Morrow, the county sheriff, and you're going to tell him exactly what happened in this yard tonight." Briggs looked at Morrow. Then he looked at Wade. Then he looked at Nora. "The women in the ledger," he said slowly. "How young?" Nora looked at him steadily. "The youngest contract I found recorded was 19, but some of the women had children with them." She paused. "Clara Hess has 2, 7 and 9 years old." Briggs looked away. His jaw moved. When he looked back, something in his face had shifted permanently, closed on one side and opened on the other, like a door that had been stuck and had finally, with enough pressure, come free. "Boys," he said to the men beside him, "we're done here." Morrow spun his horse toward them. "Briggs, I will have your badge, your land, and everything. Colonel Morrow." Briggs's voice had gone flat and final. "With respect, shut up." 3 of the 5 men turned their horses and walked them back through the gate. The other 2 looked at Morrow, then at the direction the first 3 had gone, and then they followed. Morrow sat alone in the yard. Just him and his horse, and the August dark, and Wade on the porch with a rifle, and Nora standing 10 feet away with a pistol, and 9 years of the Settlement Society, and 14 names, and the expression of a woman who had decided somewhere between that sack on the South Road and this yard that she was entirely finished being afraid of this man. "You have nowhere to put this," Morrow said. The warmth was finally gone. What was left was stripped down and plain and considerably smaller than what had been wearing the warmth all this time. One doctor's testimony, a woman's word, a copy of a ledger my lawyers will call a forgery before the week is out. 2 copies, Nora said. 2 separate doctors. Dorothy Price's eyewitness account. Briggs and his men. And the 3 women you had removed, the ones who tried to speak. She tilted her head slightly. Their names are in the ledger too. In your handwriting. You recorded everything, Silas. Every transaction, every placement, every payment. She looked at him with those green eyes that his own deputy had just compared to the creek in spring. You were so certain you were untouchable that you kept meticulous records. That was your mistake. Morrow went very still. The women who signed that renewal clause, Nora said. Clara Hess. She has 2 children watching her try to get free of you. They are going to watch her walk out of that boarding house because her name is on that ledger, and her name does not disappear. Her voice was level and absolute. You're done. Morrow looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Wade. His last calculation was running and coming up empty, and they could both see it happening in real time. 9 years of constructed authority dismantled in one August night in a ranch yard in Wyoming by a woman he'd put in a sack and a man who'd stopped his wagon because his daughter told him to. This isn't over, Morrow said. It is for tonight, Wade said. Get off my property. Morrow looked at them both one more time. Then he turned his horse and rode out through the back gate, and the dark swallowed him up, and the sound of hooves faded until there was nothing left of him but the echo of them. And then, not even that. Nora stood in the yard after he was gone and didn't move for 10 full seconds. Then the pistol lowered to her side and she let out one long breath, and her shoulders came down from somewhere near her ears, and she stood in the August night and just breathed. Wade came down the porch steps. He stopped beside her. You weren't supposed to come out, he said. I know, she said. I told you to stay at the back window. I heard you. She looked at him. I am done letting that man stand in front of people and perform while I stay out of sight. Something in her voice was quiet and absolute and entirely finished negotiating with itself. I am done with that. He looked at her for a moment. Fair enough, he said. He's not finished, she said. You know that. I know. He'll try to reach Aldridge before morning, block him before he gets to Casper. Can he? Wade was already thinking about the road north, the creek trail, the timing. There's one thing he doesn't know yet, he said. She looked at him. Dorothy wasn't going to Sheridan just for the ledger copy, he said. She was going to talk to a woman named Ruth Hadley. She writes for the Casper Weekly Tribune. I sent word with Dorothy yesterday morning before Aldridge left. Nora stared at him. When did you... Before the deputies came with the warrant, he said. I wrote the letter while you were writing down the ledger contents. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how the day would go, and if it fell apart, I didn't want you carrying one more thing. His voice was matter of fact, no drama in it. Seemed better to have it already moving. She looked at him the way people looked at things that turned out to be different from what they'd expected to find and didn't know yet how to account for the difference. Ruth Hadley, she said slowly. She wrote the piece 2 years ago about the territory land grants, about where the federal money actually went. She did, Wade said, and Morrow tried to pull her press credentials over it. Which means she's been waiting, Nora said. 2 years, Wade said, for something she can stand behind in print. He looked at her steadily. A documented ledger, a doctor's sworn testimony, a first-hand account, and 4 deputies who just walked away from a midnight enforcement action. He paused. That's not a county story. Understanding moved through Nora's face in stages, slow at first, then faster, then landing somewhere very large. That's a territory-wide story, she said. Front page, Wade said. Above the fold. She looked at him for a long, unguarded moment. And then something happened that he hadn't seen from her yet. Not the almost smiles, not the fractured edges, not the controlled surface holding everything underneath. Something deeper. Her eyes went wet, just the edges, the same way they had in the kitchen that first morning when June had touched her face. But this time she didn't hold it back entirely. You did all that, she said. Yesterday morning, when you barely knew me. June knew you, he said simply. That was enough. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for 1 second. 1 second only. Then she lowered it and straightened, and she was herself again, but the kind of herself that had just set something down and was standing differently for having done it. We're not safe yet, she said. No, he agreed. He'll move against Aldridge tonight. He'll try. Wade looked toward the road north. But Margaret's cousin drives the night freight run to Casper. I asked Dorothy to make sure Aldridge didn't ride alone. He looked at Nora. They left together 2 hours before Aldridge knew he was going. She stared at him. You've been doing this all day. Quietly, he said. Since morning. The loudest move was never going to be the right one. She was quiet for a long moment. The cicadas had started up again out past the fence line. Somewhere in the barn, one of the horses settled. The August night pressed in warm and close around the yard. Then Nora said, I need to tell you something. Something I haven't told anyone. He waited. The last entry in the ledger, she said. The most recent one. She looked at him directly, and her voice stayed even in the particular way it stayed, even when she was placing something on the ground between them that had been inside her too long. It's not one of the other women. He went still. It's mine, she said. He wrote me into the ledger, not as a resident, not as a runaway. She held his gaze without looking away from any part of what she was saying. As an asset. Current. Estimated value. Transfer arranged. The yard was very quiet. He didn't intend courts or charges or any of it, she said. He intended to sell me. The sack wasn't to kill me. It was transport. She said the next words the way you said things you had already been alone with long enough that they'd lost the power to break you, but had never lost the power to land. I found that entry the night before I ran. That's what finally made me move. Wade stood very still in the August dark, and understood for the first time completely what this woman had been running from, and what she had been running toward, and what it had cost her to keep running when there was nowhere left to go. He said one thing. He said it quietly, and he meant it the way he'd meant very few things in his life. He will not touch you again, he said. Not while I'm breathing. That is not a promise I'm making lightly." Nora looked at him for a long time in the dark. The kind of looking that had nothing to do with hope and everything to do with evidence. She searched his face the way she'd been searching faces for years, looking for the place where it would crack, where the performance would show through, where the thing underneath would turn out to be something she already knew how to survive. She didn't find it. And for the first time since Wade Calloway had cut her out of a burlap sack on the South Road, Nora Bell believed someone completely. They didn't sleep. There was no pretending to, no point in it. Wade sat on the porch with his rifle, and Nora sat beside him, with the pistol, and the August dark pressed down on the ranch like something with weight and intention, and neither of them suggested the other go inside because they both understood that what was coming would come whether they were rested or not. "Tell me about Clara Hess," Wade said. Not because it was useful. Because Nora needed somewhere to put the waiting, and talking was better than silence when silence had teeth. She looked at the dark yard. 40 years old. Came west from Ohio after her husband died of a fever. 2 children, a boy and a girl. She thought the society was going to give her a new start. A pause. She was practical, not soft, the kind of woman who counts what she has before she decides what she needs. Nora's voice stayed even. She used to save the good bread from supper and split it between her children even when she was hungry herself. I told her she had to eat too. She told me the children needed it more. A beat. She was right. I wasn't. She sounds like someone who knows how to survive, Wade said. She does. That's the only reason I believe she's still there, and not one of the names at the back of the ledger. Nora turned the pistol slowly in her hands. When I left, she was on her 9th month. The debt had grown to 3 times what it started at. She'd stopped asking Morrow about the numbers. She'd stopped asking about a lot of things. She pressed her lips together. That's the stage that frightened me most. When a woman stops asking. It means she started believing what they've been telling her about herself. Wade said nothing. He just stayed present, the way you stayed with something that didn't need advice, only witness. If the ledger reaches Aldrich, Nora said, they'll have to open every contract, every placement, every name. Every one, Wade said. Clara Hess doesn't stay in that boarding house past the week the investigation opens. Her name is in your handwriting on paper that is right now sitting in a federal judge's office. She looked at him. Something shifted in her face. Not relief, she wasn't ready for relief yet, but something adjacent to it. The first inch of a door that had been sealed for a long time. You're very certain, she said, for a man who's never done anything like this before. Never done what? Taken on a federal commissioner with 5 men and a network of appointed judges. First time, he said. How does it feel? He thought about it honestly. Like I've been running a ranch on half my engine for 6 months, he said, and somebody finally reminded me what the other half was for. She was quiet for a moment. Then in the voice she used for things she'd thought through carefully before saying, she said, Wade, whatever happens tonight, whatever comes after the testimony and the investigation and all of it. She paused. I need you to know that I wasn't looking for this, for any of this. When I was in that sack, the only thing I was trying to do was survive long enough to get the ledger out. I wasn't looking for... She stopped. I know, he said. I'm not saying it to push you away. I know that too. She looked at him. Then what are you saying? He looked at the dark yard for a moment, at the fence line, at the road beyond it that he'd been watching since morning. I'm saying that a man who drives to town for flour and boot nails on a Tuesday morning and comes home with a reason to be more than functional should probably not waste too much time pretending he doesn't know what that means. He kept his voice dry and plain the way he kept most things. That's all I'm saying. The silence that followed was the kind that meant something had been acknowledged and didn't need to be expanded on. Not yet. There was time for expanding on things, later assuming later arrived the way they both needed it to. Then his horse in the barn called out sharp once, and they were both on their feet. A rider, coming fast up the main road. Not the organized rhythm of men in formation, one-horse hard pace, no attempt at quiet. Someone who wasn't hiding what they were doing. Wade had the rifle up when the rider came through the open gate and pulled hard hands going up immediately before the horse had fully stopped. "Easy," the rider said. "I'm not armed. My name's Thomas Price, Dorothy's nephew. She sent me." Wade kept the rifle up. "From Sheridan. From Harrow Creek. Aunt Dorothy rode in an hour ago. She's been talking to Briggs." The young man reached into his coat, slowly watching the rifle, and produced a folded envelope. "And she's been talking to Ruth Hadley. All three of them are at the hotel in town right now." He held out the envelope. "Aunt Dorothy wanted you to have this tonight." Wade came down the steps and took it without lowering the rifle. He handed it to Nora. She unfolded it and held it toward the porch lamp and read it in the warm yellow light. And her face changed as she read, not all at once, but in stages, the way a face changed when impossible things kept turning out to be real, and the mind had to keep revising what it thought was possible. "Briggs signed a sworn statement," Nora said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "An hour ago, everything about tonight. What you said about the ledger, why he walked away, all of it." She looked up. "And Ruth Hadley." She stopped. She read the next part again. "Ruth Hadley already wrote the story. She's had it written for 6 months waiting for documentation she could stand behind publicly." Nora looked at Wade. "She's sending it on the morning stage to the Casper Tribune and wiring it to the Denver Post simultaneously. Both papers." Thomas lowered his hand slowly, satisfied nobody was going to shoot him. "Mrs. Price also said to tell you, and I'm quoting her exactly because she made me repeat it back twice. Tell that stubborn rancher that Morrow left Harrow Creek 2 hours ago, heading north on the creek trail, and nobody knows where. And Dorothy says that is not a good sign, so keep his eyes open." The relief that had been quietly gathering in Nora's face reset completely. Wade was already moving, reading the same information she was. North wasn't Casper. North was the creek trail. The same route he'd sent Aldridge on. "How fast is that horse?" Wade said to Thomas. "Fast enough," the young man said. Wade looked at Nora. She was already looking at him. She knew before he said it. "Go," she said. "Nora." "I have the pistol. Thomas is here. Briggs's statement is already signed." She stepped toward him. "Aldridge has the ledger and everything that matters. You go." Her voice was steady and certain. "Go." He held her gaze for 1 second. Then he was at the barn and saddling his horse in the dark by feel the way he'd done it 100 times, and 4 minutes later he was through the gate and riding north at the best pace the darkness allowed. The creek trail ran along the dry creek bed and wound through 2 miles of scrub and flat rock before it opened onto the main north road. Wade pushed the horse hard and kept his mind on the timing. Aldridge had left that morning. He had hours on Morrow, but Morrow knew this territory. He'd been working it for 9 years. He knew every shortcut, every fork, every place where a man could be stopped without witnesses and without noise. He heard them before he saw anything. Voices low and controlled, which was worse than shouting, because controlled voices meant the situation was already contained by someone who knew what they were doing. He came around the bend and found them. Aldridge's wagon stopped across the road. 2 horses alongside it. Morrow alone, he'd left his remaining men behind, come north himself, which meant he was past strategy and into the kind of desperation that made careful men do careless things. He was standing at the side of the wagon with one hand on Aldridge's arm and the other resting on the pistol at his hip, not drawn yet just present. Margaret's cousin Robert sat on the wagon bench with his hands very still in his lap, watching Morrow with the calm of a man who had decided to let the situation develop before he introduced the shotgun he was sitting on. Wade pulled up hard, 20 feet away. His horse skidded. Morrow turned in the lamplight from the wagon. He looked different from any version of himself Wade had seen in the past 2 days. The warmth was completely gone. The careful construction of 9 years was gone. What was left was a man standing in the dark on a dirt road alone, holding onto a doctor's arm, which was the most honest picture of Silas Morrow that had ever existed. "Cole," Morrow said. "Let go of him," Wade said. Morrow's hand didn't move. "The document he's carrying is already copied," Wade said. "Ruth Hadley has a copy. Dorothy Price has a copy. Briggs signed a sworn statement an hour ago." He looked at Morrow steadily over the rifle. "There is no version of tonight where you ride back to Harrow Creek and any of this goes away. The only question left is how many more laws you break between now and when Aldrich's people come for you." Morrow's hand released Aldrich's arm. Aldrich stepped back and straightened his coat with the deliberate dignity of a man converting fear into something more useful. He looked at Wade and gave one short nod. "He threatened to burn the document," Aldrich said. "I told him there were copies," Wade said. "I told him too. He didn't believe either of us." Aldrich looked at Morrow with a doctor's eyes. Full inventory. No warmth. "He believes it now." Morrow looked at the road, then at the trees, then at Wade. The calculation was running in real time and coming up empty from every direction, and the emptiness of it was written plainly on his face for the first time in 9 years, because there was nobody left to perform for. "I built that organization," Morrow said. "It came out raw and unplanned. The words of a man who'd told himself a story so many times, it had calcified into something he partially believed. The territory had nothing for those women. Nothing. I gave them placement employment, a new start. I gave them something when they had nothing. You gave them a debt they couldn't repay and a door they couldn't open," Wade said. "Everything else you told yourself, so you could look at yourself in the morning." Morrow stared at him. "You don't understand what it cost to build something like—" "You looked at women with nothing," Wade said, "and you saw an opportunity. That's what you did. Every story you told yourself after that was just the price of sleeping." He kept his voice even. "You knew exactly what you were doing. That's why you kept records. Men who believe they're doing right don't track the money that carefully." Morrow's hand moved toward his pistol. Wade's rifle was up before the motion completed. Robert's shotgun appeared from beneath the bench in the same moment. Aldrich threw himself sideways off the wagon seat. Morrow's hand stopped. He stood in the road with 2 weapons on him, and the Wyoming night pressing in from every direction, and the last calculation finished running and came up with nothing. His hands dropped slowly. "Unbuckle it," Wade said. "The whole belt. Let it fall." A long moment. Then Morrow reached down and unbuckled the gun belt and let it drop into the road dust. It landed without ceremony. 9 years of authority, and it made the same sound as anything else hitting dirt. "Aldrich," Wade said. "You all right?" "Considerably better than 4 minutes ago." Aldrich climbed back onto the wagon bench with the composure of a man who had earned every year of his 60. He looked at Morrow one time. The way a doctor looked at something that had been presented to him for assessment. "You should remember this moment," he said to Morrow. "It's the last one you'll have where you get to decide how you carry yourself." He clicked his tongue, and the wagon moved. Robert followed without a word, the shotgun resting across his knees until the wagon disappeared into the darkness ahead. Wade and Morrow were alone on the road. Morrow looked at his gun belt in the dust. "You going to take me in?" "I'm going to ride behind you back to Harrow Creek," Wade said. "And you're going to walk into Sheriff Garrett's office and surrender yourself. Garrett answers to the county, not to you. And he has been waiting a long time for sufficient reason to put you somewhere." Wade looked at him. "You do that, and I don't tell anyone you drew on an unarmed wagon in the dark. What you do between here and that sheriff's office is the last piece of yourself you've got any say over." Morrow stood in the road for a long moment. The creek bed was dry beside them. The stars were out and indifferent above them. Then he bent down and picked up the gun belt and slung it over his saddle without buckling it on. And he rode south toward Harrow Creek. And Wade rode 10 feet behind him the whole way. and neither of them said a single word. Sheriff Garrett was on the jailhouse steps when they came down the main street, which told Wade that Dorothy Price had already been there, and that Dorothy Price had told him exactly what to expect because Garrett was a man who was never on his steps at this hour unless he knew something was coming. He held a lamp, and he looked at the two of them, and at the gun belt slung over Morrow's saddle, and he said nothing at all. Just held the door open. Morrow walked in. Garrett looked at Wade. "I'm going to need a full account in the morning." "You'll have it. Briggs's statement is at the hotel. Dorothy Price and Ruth Hadley can corroborate everything." Garrett looked at the jailhouse door. He was a careful man, Garrett. Not slow. Just careful in the way of someone who'd learned that things done right the first time rarely needed doing again. 9 years, he said, very quietly. Not to Wade, just to the night itself. 9 years I watched that man walk around this territory like he was made of something better than the rest of us. His jaw worked. I never had quite enough to act. "Tonight you've got more than enough," Wade said. Garrett nodded once. "That girl out at your place, she's safe. For tonight. I'll send 2 men out at first light. Keep your property secured until the federal office responds." He paused. "Morrow have other men." "1 or 2. They'll run when word gets out he's in custody. I'll put it out by morning." Garrett looked at him steadily. "You did right, Calloway. All of it." Wade touched his hat brim and rode home. Nora was on the porch when he came through the gate. Standing, the pistol still in her hand, Thomas Price's horse still tied at the rail, which meant she'd sent the boy away and stayed on that porch alone, watching the road for however long it had taken. She read his face before he reached the porch steps, and something in her posture changed. Not collapse, not relief exactly. Something more fundamental than either, like a structure that had been built entirely to withstand a specific pressure, slowly recognizing that the pressure had stopped, that it was allowed to stop. That stopping was not a trick. "Aldridge," she said. "On his way to Casper." He swung down from the horse. "Morrow's in Garrett's jailhouse." Nora put her free hand against the porch post, just her fingers against the wood, steadying something that didn't need steadying anymore, but steadied anyway from pure long habit. "Briggs's statement," she said. "Already signed. Ruth Hadley's story goes out on the morning stage." He tied the horse to the rail and came up the steps. "Both papers. By noon tomorrow, it's out of this territory entirely." She looked at her hand against the post. She looked at it for a long time. "I've been running for 2 months," she said. "After I got out of the boarding house, there was nowhere that felt far enough. Every town I came through, I kept moving because stopping felt like dying." Her voice had gone quiet. "I was on that road because I'd stopped believing there was anywhere left to go. I wasn't walking toward something. I was just still moving because stopping felt like giving up." "And then June stopped the wagon," Wade said. She looked at him. "And then June stopped the wagon." The rooster in the yard started up. The sky to the east had gone from black to the deep blue that meant the night had turned its corner toward morning without anyone quite noticing the moment it happened. "There's going to be a process," Wade said. "Federal investigation, testimony, multiple times probably. It won't be comfortable. I know. Morrow has people in comfortable places. They don't disappear overnight." "I know that too." She looked at him directly. "I've been carrying those 14 names for 2 months. I'll carry them through every courtroom it takes. Dorothy will navigate the legal side. She's got more fight in her than most men I know." "I noticed," Nora said. "Aldridge will testify. Briggs and his men. Ruth Hadley's story will push the federal office to move faster than they'd like." He looked at her. "Clara Hess will be out of that boarding house before the month is out." Something moved through Nora's face at that, real and unguarded. She didn't look away from it this time. She let it be there, visible in the early gray light of a Wyoming morning on the porch of a ranch she'd been brought to in the back of a wagon 24 hours ago. "What happens now?" she said. After all of it. After the testimony and the investigation and... She gestured at the shape of everything that still lay ahead. Wade looked at the horizon where the iron gray was going pale gold at the edges. That's up to you, he said. You're a free person. You go where you want. Do what you choose. He paused. But if you're asking what I'd prefer... He stopped, started again. I've got a ranch that needs more than one set of hands. I've got a daughter who decided in approximately 4 hours that you're the most important person she's met since her mother died, and June doesn't make that determination lightly, and she doesn't unmake it. He kept his voice dry and plain. And I've got a porch that seats two. He looked at the fence line. Anna used to say that a place isn't a home until it's been chosen, not inherited, not assigned, chosen. He looked back at Nora. You can choose where you go from here. I'm just telling you one of your options is staying. Nora looked at the yard, at the barn, at the pale gold spreading on the horizon above the fence line, at the loose step on the right side of the porch that had been loose since March, at Wade Calloway, who had stopped a wagon on a dirt road because his daughter told him to, and had spent 2 days building a wall between a marked woman and the man who believed he had already settled her price, and who had ridden out in the dark, not because it was safe or smart, but because it was necessary, and he was the kind of man for whom necessary and enough had always been the same thing. You said Anna chose this place, Nora said. She did. Tell me about her. He was quiet for a moment. A considering quiet, not a painful one. She was certain, he said. The way June is certain. Saw to the center of things without needing to circle around them first. No patience for wasted words or wasted time. He paused. She would have liked you. She had no patience for people who accepted things that deserved to be fought. Nora was quiet for a moment. June said I have her eyes. The color of them, he said. And the way they go still when they've decided something. She looked at him steadily. Then she said, I want to be somewhere Clara Hess can come to, when she gets out. Somewhere she can bring her children, and know it's solid ground. Then be somewhere solid, he said. Here, she said. Here, he agreed. The gold on the horizon was spreading fast now, and the rooster was fully committed to his opinion about it, and somewhere down the road toward Dorothy's place, a wagon was already moving. Wade knew that wagon. He knew the pace of it, and the pace was too fast for Dorothy driving it, and exactly right for June, who had been awake since before the rooster, and who had decided that a reasonable amount of time had passed, and that reasonable was a concept that applied to other people. He heard it before he saw it, and Nora heard it too, and they both turned toward the sound. The wagon came through the gate with June standing on the bench with her yellow hair loose and her voice already going before the horse had fully stopped. Papa, Nora, I heard the rooster. Is it done? Did Aldridge make it? Where's Morrow? Thomas said. Briggs signed something. I couldn't sleep anyway. I tried. I really did. Dorothy makes terrible tea, and her spare bed tilts to the left, and... She hit the ground off the wagon before it stopped moving and came across the yard at a dead run. And Nora came down the porch steps, and crouched and caught her, and June wrapped both arms around Nora's neck, and held on with the complete, uncomplicated certainty of a child who had made a decision 3 days ago and saw no reason to revisit it. It's over, Nora said into June's hair. It's done. June pulled back and looked at her. Those green eyes that she'd said looked like the creek in spring, steady and direct and entirely satisfied with what they found. You're staying, June said. Not a question. I'm staying, Nora said. June nodded with the deep satisfaction of someone whose assessment had been correct from the beginning and who was too polite to say so more than once. I knew you would, she said. I told Papa you would. She looked at Wade. He said he didn't know for certain. I said, yes, you do. Papa, you just don't know you know yet. She tilted her head at her father. What did you say to that? I said June, he said in the voice, which means he knew I was right. June told Nora confidentially. She slid out of Nora's arms and took her hand instead, matter-of-factly, like it was simply where her hand went now. "Can we have breakfast? Dorothy's biscuits are fine, but she burns the eggs, and I had to eat them anyway, and be polite about it, which was very hard." "I'll make the eggs," Nora said. "I do not burn the eggs," Wade said. June and Nora looked at each other. Then they looked at him. Then June said, "Papa," with the particular patience of someone explaining something to a person they love very much, who is nonetheless wrong. And Nora pressed her lips together against a smile that came anyway, real and warm and entirely unguarded in the early morning light. And Dorothy Price pulling the wagon to the fence post with the expression of a woman who had seen enough of the world's ugliness and was actively deliberately choosing something else heard, that laugh carry across the yard. And the sound of Dorothy Price laughing in response went out across the ranch and past the fence line and into the gold morning like it had always belonged there. 38 days later, a federal judge in Casper issued warrants for the arrest of Colonel Silas Morrow and 4 associates connected to the Wyoming Women's Settlement Society. Ruth Hadley's story ran in 11 papers across 3 territories. Letters began arriving at Sheriff Garrett's office from women who had passed through the society, from families who had not known the full truth, from people who had known and said nothing, and were now finally saying something. Clara Hess walked out of the Settlement Society's Sheridan boarding house on a Wednesday morning with her 2 children and 17 cents, and the address Dorothy Price had sent her, written on a folded piece of paper that she carried in her coat pocket the entire 4 days it took her to reach Harrow Creek. When she came through the gate of the Callaway Ranch and saw Nora standing on the porch, Clara Hess sat down on the ground right there in the yard because her legs stopped working for a moment from the sheer accumulated weight of relief, and she didn't try to stand back up until Nora had crossed the yard and sat down beside her and held her hand, and they stayed there together in the September dirt until the weight distributed itself between them and became possible to carry. June observed this from the porch step with the expression of someone filing information for future reference. Then she went inside and put water on, because people who had been carrying things for a long time needed tea when they sat down, and June Callaway had learned that much at least. On an evening in late September, when the Wyoming heat had finally broken, and the sky was that particular clear blue that came after a long and difficult summer, Wade fixed the loose step on the right side of the porch. Nora handed him the tools without being asked. June sat on the other step and offered comprehensive technical commentary on everything he was doing wrong. And from inside the house came the sound of Clara's children running down the hall, and Clara's voice telling them not to run, and the smell of biscuits from the kitchen where Clara was learning the recipe that had been Anna's. Wade set the last nail and stood up and tested the step with his boot. Solid. Finally solid. Nora stood beside him and looked at it. "It only took 6 months," she said. "I've been busy," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. And the thing that passed between them in that moment was not dramatic, and it was not decorated, and it was not the kind of thing that needed words, because it was already built out of every word that had been spoken across kitchen tables and dark porches and Wyoming dirt roads, since the morning a child had pressed her hand to a burlap sack and said, "Papa, something's still breathing in there." June looked up at both of them and then went back to her commentary without comment, because June Callaway had known how this was going to go from the first afternoon, and she had simply waited with the patience of someone who understood that the people you chose, and the places you made yours, and the lives you built out of wreckage and will and the willingness to stop a wagon on a dirt road, those things took exactly as long as they took and not a moment less. The ranch was full of noise and argument, and the smell of supper and the sound of children and all of it, every ordinary, stubborn, loud, alive piece of it, was exactly what it was supposed to be. A home that had been chosen. And that made it unbreakable.